My name's Brenda Davis, and I'm a registered dietitian. I live in Kelowna, British Columbia, which is about 4 hours east of Vancouver. And I have been a dietitian for about 35 years, and I have been a vegan for about 30 years. I think that my work has been really pioneering work in vegan and vegetarian nutrition over the course of my career. And I began my career as a public health nutritionist teaching the traditional food guide with the, meat and dairy and as food groups and so forth. And so 30 years ago, when I decided to make this switch to more of a plant-based diet, I was a little bit worried that I might be ousted from my profession because I didn't even know if there were other real live vegetarian dietitians on the planet. I had never met one. So it really was in a time when this was a little bit of a novel thing to do. And the change I've seen over 30 years of doing this is so encouraging. There was a time when I would have hardly believed that we would be at where we're at today. But it's wonderful to see. And I think in North America, the transition has been a little more rapid than in Europe, where vegan diets especially are concerned. But my area of, sort of expertise is, of course, in vegetarian and vegan nutrition. And so I just finished my 10th book, so have written fairly extensively and have also been involved in a little bit of research on diabetes, and this is specifically in the Marshall Islands. So right now I'm in private practice. Most of what I do is writing and speaking and doing lifestyle interventions in various places. And that's, really my passion. I'm very happy that when I decided to make this switch over to a plant-based diet, that I didn't leave my profession, because I was a little bit nervous about how my fellow colleagues would react, and probably rightly so in the early days. This was something a little bit new to them. But what I found is they were always interested. They were always interested in how vegetarians could do this right. And so that was our niche. My writing partner, Vasanto Molina, and I, that was our niche. And we helped dietitians to help their clients to do this properly. And one of the things that maybe upsets me the most about the mainstream dietetic practice is where dietitians, instead of teaching people how to do this properly, they just say, oh, you shouldn't do it, it's too dangerous, or, children shouldn't be vegetarian, or whatever. Because I think that the blame for children who don't do well falls squarely on our own shoulders. We need to be providing really good, solid guidelines so nobody gets this wrong. And that is possible. We've seen hundreds and thousands of children grow up healthy on plant-based diets. So it's no question that it can be done. It's just, how do we get this done appropriately and in a way that absolutely minimizes, if not eliminates, the risk for the most vulnerable people. One of the questions I often get asked is, why did I become vegan? I actually lived in Northern Ontario, this 30 years ago when I made the switch. And Northern Ontario is hunting and fishing territory. Everybody hunts and fishes. There are no vegetarians there. It was a time when it would have been very unlikely for anybody living there to make that kind of switch in their diet. But what happened to me was, I was a dietitian who was very interested in health. And I found myself gradually transitioning to eating more things like lentils and vegetables, and just this gradual shift towards a more plant-rich or plant-strong diet, if you will. But what put me over the edge towards a completely vegan diet was the most unlikely source you would ever imagine. It was actually a very dear friend who was on his way hunting, on a hunting expedition. He was hunting for deer. And when he asked, he called and said, can I stop by on my way deer hunting? And I said, sure. But I had a big heart for animals, and I was very disturbed that he was going to be going and shooting another innocent animal. And so I thought, what could I say to him that would stop him from shooting another deer? And so when he arrived, I said, I don't understand why you want to go kill a deer. They're such beautiful, innocent animals. Why, all they want to do is live. Why would you go and shoot one when you don't have to? And it was what he responded to me that changed the course of my life. So I thought I was going to convince him of something, but in fact, it ended up backfiring in a very big way. So what he said to me was, he said, just because you don't have the guts to pull the trigger does not mean you are not responsible for the trigger being pulled every time you buy your piece of meat camouflaged in cellophane in the grocery store. He said, at least the animals I eat have had a life. I doubt you could say the same for the ones that are sitting on your plate. And it was the first time anybody had ever said to me that I need to take responsibility for the food that I was purchasing from the grocery store. And I always had this image of, sort of old MacDonald's farm in my mind, where my mom grew up on a farm and they had this cow Betsy, and they milked her and drank her milk, and they had a couple of pigs, and it was a very old-fashioned family, a small family farm, mainly growing wheat and things like that, but a few animals. And I imagined life for animals was like it was on that farm my mom grew up on. And after this friend challenged me in this way, I decided that I needed to learn more about where the animals I was eating were coming from. And I spent a couple of weeks researching that. And what I learned filled me with shame, to be honest. I was ashamed to be a human being because what had happened over some years was that the number of animals that we were killing had grown so much that in order for farmers to make money, they were creating systems of farming that were very, very intensive. We call them concentrated animal feeding operations now, where you might have 100,000 pigs in one factory. Pigs are animals that have the intelligence of well, actually probably a little more intelligence than the average dog. They've been rated to be as intelligent as about a 3-year-old child, and I think for dogs it's about a 2.5-year-old child. And pigs, there was a study in Berkeley that showed that they could be taught very quickly, how to play a computer game where they had to match 2 items that were the same, and when they would match them correctly, they would get a treat coming out of this little funnel. And the researcher said there was no pig that ever made a mistake on that game. She said she tried to teach chimpanzees that game, and it took them way longer to figure it out than it took any pig. And she said dogs, they couldn't teach to play that game. So pigs are far more intelligent than what we understand. And when you think about 100,000 pigs in a building, their normal lifespan, I think, is about 12 to 15 years, very similar to dogs. They live 6 months. 6 months in the most horrendous conditions that you can possibly imagine. So they're in this cage where they can't lay down, they can hardly move, their tails are cut off, their ears are docked, their genitals are, they're castrated when they're about 3 weeks old, and all of this to reduce sort of their chances of going insane and biting the pig in front of them's tail off or whatever it is. Their smellers are about 200 times more sensitive than ours. And the dust and dander in these buildings is so bad that we have to wear a gas mask to go in. And those poor animals live in that filth. And these are not filthy animals. They're actually very clean animals. And we've got this kind of nightmare of a 6-month life for these very sentient, very intelligent beings. And then we, you know, the first time they ever see daylight is when they get taken by truck to a slaughterhouse. And the slaughterhouse, we're trying to be so efficient with line speeds that it's estimated that 10 to 30% of these animals are inadequately stunned and boiled alive. Now, would we ever do that to our dog? I don't think so. So why are we justified in doing that to an animal that's every bit as intelligent, every bit as sensitive? There is no justification. And so we're slaughtering 70 billion animals on this planet a year. And our population is just growing. The demand for meat is growing in developing nations. It's a system that makes absolutely, to me, it's a system that is ethically unjustifiable. And so I got to a point in my life where I said, I don't want to contribute to that kind of pain, suffering, and death when I don't have to. And we don't have to. Not only do we not have to be putting animals through this kind of misery, it's actually, we're harming the planet in the process, because raising these animals for food is so ecologically destructive, and we're harming our own health, because many of the diseases from which we're perishing are induced by eating too much of this high-fat animal product. So it's a you know, a lose-lose-lose proposition to be farming animals in this way and to be consuming them. To me, I think as thinking human beings, we should have enough intelligence to be able to come up with a system of producing food that doesn't cause such pain and suffering in other creatures, and actually is ecologically sustainable for this ever-expanding human population. And so I don't care if people say, well, it tastes good, well, it's this, it's that, it's got lots of protein, whatever it is, we should be intelligent enough to figure out another way, even if that way is, as we're going to be hearing about later at this conference, figuring out how to culture meat, or how to make a burger that tastes like meat. We need to have the technology to figure out things so that people that want that taste maybe can get that taste without causing the kind of destruction that we're causing.